bias and cultural competency.
That's right.
So what does that mean? It means that you have systems that are have turned a blind eye to the fact that racism runs rampant in foster care. And so there's a couple statistics that I want to share with you just about where we are, and then I'm going to talk about what the PAJ is doing to combat these issues. This is from childwelfare.gov. It's kind of hard to see, but here's a fun fact for you to see for yourself.
We'll send it out to everybody.
Yeah. Well, this is basically going on to talk about the majority of kids in the system, what the issues are when you talk about, majority being children of color. Here is some local data for you to take a look at, and this is from kidsdata.org. It's an amazing, data site that talks a lot about, that gives some more like steep context. So children by race and ethnicity, and you can see here by this graph, this is California and San Diego County. So in San Diego County, there in 2017 was over 4,000 foster youth in the system. Today, as we're speaking, there's over 2,500 youth in San Diego's foster care system. Those children, majority of them are African American. Indian American comes in second. Latino comes in third. But here's what, and this is obviously data that deals with more specific youth, as far as youth who stay in foster care through the whole period of time. So they get in at 4 and they go until 18, or they get in, for an extensive period of time. They're in foster care, consistent numbers. We know that there are even more that are in and out, right? So when you talk about the immigration pipeline, right, the intersection between immigration and foster care, there is a real intersection. Many of these young people who are taken, when ICE comes and take parents into custody, some of these children are taken to Polinsky, where I was placed. So there is a real issue when you talk about systems and where majority of these foster youth are. But majority of foster care, children in foster care, so that 2,500 youth, are African American in San Diego County. And another piece here that you should know about. So this is Voices for Children. They shared some data here. So this just goes on to talk about, 440,000 foster youth in America's child welfare system. Majority of them are children of color. So I don't need to keep going over that, but I want you to understand that all of this data, which is all available online, you can look this up. I always like to show this though, so people have a visual and understand that this is a real thing. This is not somebody picking at an issue and saying, oh, this is racism. This is a real issue when you talk about cultural competency. So what is exactly happening? Well, there's a few things happening. One is that when a child is taken from their family, the system was created, was the initial goal of the foster care system was to build reunification efforts, right? Was when a kid is taken from their family for whatever reason, kid goes into the system initially was created, the foster care system, to rehabilitate families. Well, what started happening was there started being a lot of federal resources going into foster care child welfare. And so what does that mean? The more beds I can fill up, the more resources I can get from the federal government. Counties started looking at the opportunity and saying, all right, well, there are ways that we can go about this, right, to keep more kids in care. The more kids we have in care, the more resources we can get from the federal government. Or the more we can maintain a certain number, the more resources we can get from the federal government. So the system's initial goal became monopoly over what the initial goal, which was to rehabilitate. So you have black children, Latino children, Indian children traveling through a system, right? And then you have another issue, which is real, is you have the lack of African American or culturally competent foster parents. And so James is going to talk a little bit about that just briefly. James Poindexter.
James Poindexter. Media assistant.
So a little bit about my story in a super Cliff Notes version. I'm from West Virginia, and I was in foster care in West Virginia. My biological parents, I remember like it was yesterday, they had an argument. Mom decided she wanted to leave Dad. She left, went to New York, took my sister, left. And Dad decided 2 months later he wanted to go get her back. So he left to go get her back. Problem is they forgot about me and left me in a house at 10 years old. And I didn't see them again until I was 25.
Wow.
So during that time, in the next 5 years, I moved 21 times. I went to 6 junior highs, 5 high schools before I was done with that situation. And what happened in West Virginia is 97% Caucasian. Just the state in general, the demographic of the state is 97% Caucasian. So every foster home I went to was usually Caucasian. And between the group homes and the foster homes, nobody had any cultural awareness of how to deal with me. And I wasn't able to have any success until the very last set of parents I was with, who were also African American. I got with them at 16, and from 16 to 18, I learned everything I needed to know, and I was able to go into college and get 2 college degrees. And I was able to have some success outside of college. I joined martial arts. I became world champion a lot of years ago.
I was gonna say.
But I was able to have a whole lot of success, but it was because I finally got with some people who were able to understand my situation. And then I came to San Diego, and I started trying to work to help foster parents have a little bit of cultural awareness. We don't have enough non-white foster parents, and the ones who we have don't have a lot of cultural awareness, cultural competency. So you get a situation where you have a kid like me who goes into care and they put you with a white family, and then that family doesn't understand my situation, so as soon as I do something a little different from what they expect, they give me back to a group home.
Yeah.
And that happened over and over and over. That happened to me. We'll see, out of the 21 moves, 10 of them were group homes. So 10 other times I was with a Caucasian family. Oh, if you don't do this, we're going to give you back. If you don't do this, we're going to give you back. If you act like this, we're going to give you back. And this kept happening until I finally got with somebody who understood who I was and how to deal with me. And then it was pretty smooth from there. But this is why I believe that, and we believe that every foster parent should have some kind of cultural competency course.
Definitely.
Something to learn about who you're dealing with, because the majority of the parents are white, but the majority of the kids are not. So then you get them and you take them in, and then something happens, and then you don't know what to do, and you can't connect, and you give them back. This is a problem. And even though that happened in West Virginia, it also happens everywhere else. That's why there's still 400,000 kids in the system, because there's not enough people understanding what to do. So what we're trying to do is make sure everyone is aware of the situation, so that every kid can have the same success that I had. Thank you.
So this is James, former foster youth as well. What we're doing is we're addressing this issue in various ways. He talks about the lack of African American and culturally competent foster parents, right? There's a lack of Latino foster parents and a lack of Indian foster parents. So what happens is the system says, all right, come on, everybody apply. But the process becomes difficult. So you see families that are divided. You have a relative that tries to get a kid, right? Kid goes into the system, relative tries to go get a kid. Parents of color or families of color go through a harder process when it comes to getting custody of a child who is already in the system. It's a proven fact. An aunt trying to get somebody's son that's in the same family, but if they're Latino or African American, the process is much more rigorous. They're looked at differently, right? You see issues in child dependency court across the state, which this year we're proposing legislation, working with Mark Stone, the assembly member who's over the judicial committee in the state to address the open courts issue, because what happens is these court hearings are confidential court hearings. And what that means is that they're blocked from the public. So what happens in these courtrooms with white judges, white social workers, and white attorneys making decisions about a kid and where the kid is going to go and who's going to get custody. And guess what? Nobody is watching what's going on because there's no accountability. Nobody started caring about police accountability until there started being stuff on video showing folks getting shot and killed and beaten and brutalized by police. Am I right?
Right.
Well, until there's accountability in the courtroom in child independency court, there is not going to be a real accountability from the state level to judges who make decisions that oftentimes hurt a child's progress and future in foster care. And judges who are not competent enough to understand an African American or a Latino child. That's a problem. So when we look at these issues, right, there's a couple things that the PAJ is doing. And when you talk about the lack of homes, this is a level of outreach, but it's a level of addressing at the core level where this issue is. The county of San Diego has, for the longest, neglected children in foster care. And so earlier this year, when we announced this campaign, I said, no, I'm not going out of town. I'm staying right here in my hometown. I'm coming right back home. We're going to plant this thing right here, and we're going to put up a full-blown operation. One, we're going to make sure that young people coming out of the system have a political edge to them. So we're putting together a program that is going to prepare young people who are coming out of foster care. We're the only one that is going to organize a program to focus on cultural competency and youth advocacy from a political edge and policy-making edge from former foster youth. Because we believe that the only real way that change is going to happen is, one, if the political parties start saying, what are we going to do, and challenging these candidates running for supervisor on what their plan for child welfare services is going to be. But also the second thing is that foster youth are leading the movement for real change in the system. So when people talk about, oh, well, you know, this must be just him making an issue. No, this is a broad issue, right? And so